The signal reached Private Marcus Webb's suit at 0317 hours, 9 seconds before his dropship hit the canopy. It was a single pulse, low frequency, structured, not natural interference, not the usual electromagnetic garbage that bled off the Vethran sensor grid. This was a beacon, which meant it was a trap, or it was a destination. And Marcus had stopped caring about the difference roughly 6 hours ago, when his squad's transport took a missile through the cockpit and scattered 4 soldiers across 40 kilometers of alien mountain range. He hit the treetops feet first, suit absorbing the worst of it, branches shredding away at the ceramic plating on his shoulders and helmet. He tumbled through darkness and alien vegetation that smelled like copper and pine needles, and landed in a drainage ditch with enough force to crack 2 of his left-hand knuckles through the glove. He lay there for a moment, listening. The forest was quiet, not the good kind of quiet where nothing was hunting you. The kind of quiet that had been trained. Marcus rolled to his feet. His helmet's display had taken damage somewhere in the fall. The right half of the HUD was awash of dead pixels, and his GPS beacon was cycling through error codes like it was counting down to something. His rifle was still attached to his chest via the magnetic anchor. That was the one thing that had gone right tonight. He followed the signal. It led him uphill through dense stands of trees that the colonists back on Earth would have called redwoods if they were feeling generous. They were taller, darker, and their root systems pulsed with a faint blue bioluminescence that lit the ground in soft, shifting patterns. Marcus had been planetside for 6 months. He still wasn't used to the light. It made everything look like it was breathing. The signal led him to a wall. He almost walked into it. It rose out of the forest floor with no warning, no gradual incline, no approach. Just the trees, and then stone, ancient, dark stone, seamlessly joined, climbing 40 meters into the night sky before tapering into towers he couldn't see the tops of. The architecture was not human. It was not quite Vethran either. The Vethran built in angles, in geometry that hurt to look at for too long. All their structures designed to remind you that the species that built them had 6 perceptual axes, and a gravitational relationship with space that required 3 separate mathematical frameworks to describe. This was different, curved, almost organic, buttressed like a cathedral, but older, far older, built with a patience that had nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with endurance. There was a door. It was open, not ajar, not cracked. Open, welcoming, warm golden light spilling from inside it into the cold dark of the forest, and for one moment Marcus stood there and thought very clearly, this is absolutely a trap. He walked inside anyway, because his left arm was starting to swell from the crash and the temperature was dropping fast enough that his suit was issuing thermal warnings. And sometimes the choice between a trap and dying alone in a beautiful alien forest is not as complicated as it sounds. The interior hit him like a physical thing. It was vast. The ceiling disappeared upward into architectural shadow. The walls hung with tapestries that shimmered with colors Marcus didn't have names for, and the floor was polished to a mirror shine that reflected the soft light from 100 lanterns, arranged in patterns he suspected were not decorative. There were pillars, massive ones, and behind the pillars there was movement, shapes too large, too wrong, too entirely alien to be anything his nervous system was prepared for at this hour. He froze. One of the shapes froze back. It was 3 meters tall, roughly bipedal, with a bony carapace across its shoulders that spread out like folded wings, skin that was the color of old bark, and eyes. 2 large primary eyes and 4 smaller secondary ones arranged in a semicircle above them, that were currently wide open and fixed on Marcus with an expression that took him a full 3 seconds to identify as sheer undiluted panic. The creature made a sound, high, strangled, backwards seeming, then it turned and ran. The sound it made while running was worse. Marcus stood very still. More shapes were moving now, deeper in the hall. He could see them pulling back behind pillars into doorways around corners, dozens of them, maybe more, all stopping, all staring, all making the same strangled, terrified sound, a cascade of it rippling outward from him in concentric waves like he was a stone dropped in still water. Something occurred to Marcus. They were afraid of him. In 6 months of planetside assignment, in 2 tours before that in the outer belt engagements, in 4 years of ground warfare against the Vethran expansion and its various client species, Marcus Webb had been many things to many aliens. A target, an obstacle, an annoyance, an enemy. Occasionally, briefly, something approaching a curiosity. He had never once been the scariest thing in the room. He wasn't sure what to do with that. A voice came from above him. He looked up. On a balcony overhanging the entrance hall, level with his second floor, stood a figure that was not like the others, taller, leaner. A long coat the color of dried blood, standing with the posture of someone who had spent centuries being the most dangerous presence in every room they had ever entered, and was currently dealing with the unnerving discovery that they were not. The figure's eyes were the deep amber red of a sun going down behind smoke. They studied Marcus with the intensity of a military analyst reviewing battlefield footage, cataloging, assessing, deciding. "You should not be here," the figure said. The translator in Marcus's helmet rendered the words about a half-second after the actual vocalization, giving the statement a ghostly double cadence. "This place is unknown to your kind. My ship went down," Marcus said. "I followed the beacon." A long pause. "There is no beacon. There is. Low frequency. Structured. Either it's natural, or you've got something leaking on your south side. About 400 meters out." The figure on the balcony said nothing for a moment. Then it descended. Not by stairs, Marcus realized, but simply by stepping off the balcony and drifting down to the floor level with the particular ease of a species for whom gravity was a suggestion rather than a rule. Up close, the face resolved into something that wasn't quite human but wasn't as alien as the others. Bilateral symmetry, two primary eyes, red amber all the way through, sharp features, an expression currently cycling through calculations. "I am Veldrath," the figure said. "This is my facility, Marcus Webb. Private 14th Colonial Infantry, Earth Expeditionary." A pause. "I'm just trying to find my squad. Your kind does not find things here. Your kind does not know this place exists. Your kind just lost 3 engagements inside 6 weeks and pulled back their forward perimeter by 80 kilometers," Marcus said. "Stuff moves around. I'm not trying to cause problems. I just need a place to get warm for a few hours and figure out where my people are." Veldrath studied him, the way you studied something that had walked through your security perimeter without triggering any of the alarms, which was either deeply impressive or deeply concerning, and you had not yet determined which. "You will cause problems," Veldrath said. "You cause problems simply by existing in this space." Behind the pillars, 30 different species of alien were pressed into whatever cover they could find, watching the exchange with the fixed attention of creatures who had been told, for a very long time, that humans were a thing to be feared. Not because humans were powerful. The Vethran were powerful. Their fleet technology was beyond anything humanity had managed to replicate. Their bioengineering was centuries ahead. Their military doctrine had been refined through 50,000 years of continuous expansion. The Vethran were powerful the way a glacier was powerful, inevitable, cold, geological. Humans were not powerful that way. Humans were powerful the way fire was powerful. Veldrath had built this place, over the course of 400 years, as a sanctuary, a neutral ground, a place where the dozen species that the Vethran expansion had displaced, absorbed, or simply ground down to cultural fragments could come and be themselves, speak their own languages, observe their own customs, eat food that tasted of home, rather than rationed nutrient paste from a Vethran logistics depot. He had kept it hidden, not because he was ashamed, but because the moment any side in the current war discovered it, it would become a target. And now there was a human in his entrance hall, dripping coolant from a cracked suit joint, and looking around with the open curiosity of a species that had never, in its entire evolutionary history, learned to be afraid of dark rooms. "How many of your kind know you are here?" Veldrath asked. "Right now, just me." Marcus paused. "And you, and if you do not return, they'll search. They always search." He said it simply, without bravado. It was just true, but I'd rather not put that on your door if I can help it. Get me warm, let me charge my comms array, and I'll be gone before your guests need to know what species I am. Something moved at the edge of Veldrath's expression. It might have been amusement. It might have been the beginning of a headache. "Come," he said, "but you will not make yourself known to the others." "I wasn't planning to." Veldrath moved. Marcus followed. The facility was larger than it had appeared from outside, which was either an architectural trick or evidence that Veldrath's species had a different relationship with interior space than Marcus was equipped to appreciate. Corridors branched and curved in patterns that felt intuitive until they didn't, and the walls were thick with centuries of accumulated detail. Carved reliefs, embedded lighting, doorways sealed with materials that shifted color as you looked at them, communication panels in at least 6 different scripts. Marcus kept his hands at his sides and tried not to touch anything. They passed a common area and Marcus stopped walking. Through an archway, maybe 30 meters wide, and draped in something that functioned like a curtain but moved wrong, more like water than fabric, was a room full of alien life. Every table occupied. Every chair taken or redesigned or irrelevant because some of the species present didn't use chairs. The sound that came through the archway was something Marcus had no context for. Not laughter exactly, but something in the same emotional neighborhood. A communal rising sound that spoke of relief and warmth, and the particular exhaustion of beings who had been frightened for a long time and were, briefly, not. Veldreth had stopped beside him. "They come," he said, "because this is the only place they are not afraid. Of the war? Of everything the war has made true." A pause. "The Vethran do not accommodate. They expand, and the expansion does not leave room for anything that existed before it. These are the remainders." Marcus looked at the room. A family in the far corner, or what read to him as a family, 3 adults and 2 juveniles with the same iridescent skin pattern, sharing food from a central pot. A cluster of what he could only describe as scholars, their upper limbs all moving in the synchronized pattern. His mission briefings had identified as a communal thought expression behavior among the Kethai. A lone figure near the archway, large and gray and entirely still, eyes closed, making no sound, doing nothing except existing in a place where existing was permitted. "You've been hiding them," Marcus said. "Protecting them," Veldrath said, with a precision that was not correction so much as clarification. "From the war. From being noticed by the war. There is a difference." Marcus understood that. His unit's entire operational doctrine for the past 8 months had been predicated on the same principle. Don't be noticed. Don't give the Vethran a target. Move fast and quiet, and leave no heat signature the satellites could read. Veldrath led him to a chamber off the main corridor, equipped with something that functioned as a bed, and something that functioned as a heating system, and a panel that Marcus identified as a universal power coupling. After about 30 seconds of study, he stripped off his helmet and plugged in the comms array. "This is your room?" Marcus asked. "This is a room," Veldrath said. "I have many rooms. This one is now yours, temporarily. Why are you helping me?" The question came out before Marcus had decided to ask it. Veldrath stood in the doorway, the hallway light behind him casting his silhouette in amber. "You asked if you were causing a problem," Veldrath said. "You are. You are a human being in a place that has spent centuries arranging itself around the premise that human beings do not exist. Every creature in this facility that is old enough to know your history is currently afraid in ways they have not been afraid since the last time they were displaced." He paused. "And you walked in here, alone and injured, and your first instinct was to explain yourself and ask for help. That is either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Marcus said. "Yes," Veldrath said. "Probably both. That is also something of a human pattern, I am told." He left. Marcus lay down on something that was not quite a bed, and listened to the building settle around him. Somewhere distant, the communal sound from the great hall continued its warm rolling pattern. Someone was telling a story. He could hear the rhythm of it, call and response, the interjections from an audience who knew the story but wanted to hear it anyway. He didn't know the language. He didn't need to. He knew what that was. He slept. He woke to a sound that was not Veldrath. The door to his chamber was open a crack, and through the crack was a single large eye, primary and amber gold, at a height that suggested whoever it belonged to was either very young or very small. The eye was staring at him with the particular focused intensity of someone who has been told not to look at something and is now looking at it very hard. Marcus sat up slowly. The eye did not move. "Hi," he said. The eye blinked. Then the door swung open and the eye revealed itself to be attached to a juvenile Veldrath. Shorter, less angular, with softer features, and the same amber-red coloring but lighter, almost gold, and currently vibrating with the contained energy of a young creature that has found something extraordinary and is trying very hard to be casual about it. "You are a human," the juvenile said. The translator rendered this in a smaller voice than Veldrath's, higher, quicker. "Yep, I have heard of your kind." A pause. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" The juvenile tilted its head. "The stories say humans are terrifying, that you do not stop, that you cannot be intimidated by pain or numbers or strategy, that you simply persist until the problem is resolved, that your history is a series of occasions where you should have been extinct and were not." It paused. "You look like you fell out of a tree." Marcus looked down at himself. His suit was still cracked across the left shoulder. There was dried coolant on his sleeve. His knuckles were bruised, and he had spent the night on alien furniture. "I mean," he said, "I did fall out of a tree, technically. The juveniles made a sound. It took Marcus a moment to recognize it as laughter. Its name, when he asked, was something he couldn't pronounce in the original language. A sequence of tones that his human vocal tract physically could not reproduce, so it told him to call it Mavi, which was close enough. Mavi was Veldroth's daughter, 118 years old, which in her species development arc made her approximately adolescent, and she had, despite extensive orders to the contrary, been awake all night specifically to engineer this exact encounter. "My father says you should not interact with the guests," Marcus said, following her through a back corridor she clearly knew better than the main routes. "My father says many things," Mavi said. "He says the human war will not reach us here. He says the Vethran do not know this facility exists. He says the world outside is too dangerous for me to see." A pause. "He has been saying these things my entire life. He was saying them before I was born. The world outside is the world. I would like to see it." "The world outside is currently on fire," Marcus said. "Yes, he says that too." She looked back at him. "Is it true what they say? That humans fight because they cannot help it? That violence is stitched into your species at a level below culture, below language, below decision?" Marcus considered this. "No," he said. "That's not true. We fight because things matter to us. The fighting is the cost, not the goal." He paused. "Although I'll admit the line gets blurry sometimes." Mavi led him to a balcony on the facility's upper level, facing east, where the sun, this planet's sun, the one Marcus, still didn't have a name for in any language he spoke, was coming up behind a range of mountains with the slow, dramatic confidence of a species that has been doing this for 4 billion years and knows it's good at it. The light came in horizontal, gold and amber, the same color as Mavi's eyes. She stood at the railing and looked out at it with an expression Marcus recognized without needing a translation key. It was the expression of someone looking at a thing they had been told they could not have. "You've never left this place," Marcus said. "My father built this place to be everything I need," Mavi said. "He is correct in most ways. It is warm, it is safe, it is full of living things who have been kind to me." She paused. "But it is not the world. It is a replica of the world with all the frightening parts removed. And I have spent 118 years being aware of the difference." Marcus thought about the mission briefings. The Vethran expansion, the client species, the long, slow tide of something that called itself civilization moving through this part of the galaxy and leaving behind exactly what Veldrath had described. Remainders. Fragments. Species who once had worlds and now had a room in someone else's facility. He thought about Veldrath building this place in 1895, or whatever the local calendar equivalent was, laying the first stones out of grief and determination. 400 years of maintenance, of expansion, of adding wings and corridors and common areas and kitchens that could produce food that tasted like home for 30 different species of home. 4 centuries of one father's specific, stubborn love for all the things the galaxy was trying to erase. "He's not wrong to be afraid," Marcus said carefully. "No," Mavi agreed. "But fear and love are not the same thing even when they live in the same chest." The sun had finished its entrance. The mountains went from dark to amber to pale gold. They stayed until it was fully up. The problem found Marcus at 1100 hours, in the form of a Vethran scout drone. He spotted it from the window of the chamber Veldrath had given him. A small hexagonal unit, roughly the size of a human head, running a grid pattern at low altitude over the forest below the facility. Standard sweep. The kind that followed up an engagement, cataloging signals and heat signatures and the debris fields of crashed dropships. His dropship. Marcus did not panic. Panic was a resource expenditure, and he had a habit of auditing those carefully. He assessed. The drone was doing a grid sweep, which meant it was automated, which meant there was a Vethran command element, somewhere within relay range, that had tasked it, which meant someone had noticed the engagement debris and was cataloging it, which meant they would eventually find the signal trail, which led here. He found Veldrath in what appeared to be an administrative chamber, surrounded by communication equipment that Marcus was careful not to look at too directly, in case it constituted intelligence gathering, which was not a charge he wanted to be facing if this ended in an actual military situation. "You have a problem," Marcus said. Veldrath looked at the drone footage on the display Marcus indicated. For a long moment he was very still. "They will come here," Veldrath said. "Maybe. Depends on how far the signal trail reaches, what your EM shielding looks like, whether they decide a crashed dropship is worth following up on directly." Marcus paused. "But yes, they might. If they find this place, I know everything I have built, I know." Veldrath turned away from the display. He stood with his back to Marcus, facing the wall, and Marcus could see in the set of his shoulders the particular weight of a creature who has spent centuries building something and is now doing the arithmetic of what it would cost to lose it. "I should not have let you in," Veldrath said. "No," Marcus agreed. "But you did. You will leave. You will take your signal trail with you. You will draw awareness away from this location, and they will follow you, and this place will remain hidden." It was not a question. It was a plan being laid out as though it had already been agreed to. Marcus sat down on a piece of furniture that wasn't designed for him but held his weight. "I could do that," he said. "That's an option. I go south, make noise, draw the sweep. Good chance they catch me." He paused. "Or," Veldrath turned around, or you let me do what I'm actually trained to do." The silence in the chamber was very specific. Marcus had learned, in years of operating alongside species, that processed time and decision-making differently than humans, that silence could mean many things. This silence meant, "I am a being who has survived 4 centuries by being careful, and you are asking me to be something other than careful, and I am calculating the acceptable risk of that." "Explain," Veldrath said. Marcus explained. The drone's grid pattern had a frequency. Like all Vethran automated survey equipment, it was running on a standardized protocol with a predictable update cycle. The Vethran had not changed their survey drone firmware in 23 years, because they had not needed to, because until 8 months ago, no species in this sector had the technical capability to exploit that predictability. The 14th Colonial Infantry had spent 4 months learning to exploit it. "I can spoof the drone's return signal," Marcus said. "Make it report negative findings for this grid segment. Buy you 6 hours before the command element notices the anomaly and sends a physical unit to investigate. 6 hours is enough to harden your EM profile, drop your heat output, and look from the outside like a natural geological formation rather than an occupied facility. You can do this alone? I need access to your communications array in 30 minutes. Another silence. This one was different, shorter. "My daughter," Veldrath said. "She came to see you this morning." "She let herself in," Marcus said. "I didn't encourage, I know." A pause. "She has been wanting to encounter the world outside since before she understood what that meant. I have been trying to give her a world inside that was sufficient." He stopped. When he continued, his voice had a texture Marcus hadn't heard in it before. Something rough. Something that had been smoothed over and kept smooth through effort. "Do you have children, Private Webb?" "No." "Then I will not try to explain the arithmetic of it." He moved to the communications array and placed his hand on the primary interface. 30 minutes, he said. "You have 30 minutes." Marcus worked. The Vethran survey drone firmware exploit required precise timing. The spoof had to coincide with the drone's 90-second transmission window, override the return checksum, and insert a fabricated negative finding packet that would survive the command element's validation protocol. Marcus had done this 4 times in field conditions, twice under fire. This was the most comfortable version of the operation he had ever run. He almost appreciated the irony. 28 minutes in, Mavi appeared in the doorway. "My father sent me away," she said. "Which means something is wrong." "Something was wrong," Marcus said. "It's almost not wrong anymore." She watched him work. He was aware of her watching. That focused, quiet attention that he had first seen as wariness and had revised, over the last 12 hours, into something closer to the way a person looks at a thing they are trying to memorize. "Will you come back?" she asked, "after the war?" Marcus thought about this honestly. "I don't know," he said. "I don't know what after the war looks like. But you believe there will be one. An after." "Yeah," he said. "I do." "How?" He entered the final command string. The drone's transmission window opened, the spoof packet went through. Somewhere overhead, a machine reported that this grid segment was empty, uninhabited, geologically uninteresting, nothing worth a physical follow-up. The falsified data would take 6 hours to be flagged as anomalous by the command element's review algorithm. 6 hours was more than enough. "How do you believe in an after?" Mavi asked again as the display went green. Marcus leaned back. He thought about his squad, scattered across 40 kilometers of alien forest. He thought about the facility around him. 4 centuries of stubborn love built into stone and light and corridors full of species that were still, against all probability, here. He thought about the sunrise this morning, and the sound from the Great Hall the night before, the communal warmth of creatures who had survived the unsurvivable and were, tonight, eating food that tasted like home. "Because people like your father exist," he said. "Because someone decided that the most important thing they could do with 400 years was build a room where things could be safe. He paused. That's not a small thing. That's what an after is made of. Mavi was quiet for a moment. He did it for me, she said. In the beginning. Things started for personal reasons often end up being for everyone, Marcus said. That's also a human pattern. She made the sound again, the one he had identified as laughter. It was different this time, lower, quieter, the kind of sound that had thinking behind it. Veldrath found them there when he came to check the display. He looked at his daughter. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the green indicator on the communications panel. It worked, Veldrath said. It worked. Another silence. This one had a different texture entirely. You could have left, Veldrath said. When I told you to draw them away, you could have gone, and the problem would have resolved. At some cost, Marcus said. Yes. To you. Veldrath studied him with those amber-red eyes. You could have let it be my problem. You owe nothing to this place. No, Marcus agreed, but I was here, and I could fix it. He shrugged, which was a gesture that didn't translate across species particularly well, but that Veldrath seemed to grasp the meaning of. That's usually enough. Veldrath moved to the display and studied the drone's revised route. It had already adjusted its grid, moving away from the facility's location, following the fabricated data toward a stretch of open terrain to the south. A clean redirect, textbook. Your squad, Veldrath said. I can locate them. Our sensor network covers this region in detail. Marcus straightened. 2 survivors within 15 kilometers, Veldrath continued, reading from his own display. 1 at approximately 9 kilometers northeast, presenting an injury signature consistent with suit breach and hypothermia. 1 at 12 kilometers southeast, combat-ready but stationary, likely set up a defensive position and is waiting. Chen and Reyes, Marcus said. He was moving before he'd finished the sentence, reaching for his helmet. If Chen's got a suit breach, I will send guides, Veldrath said. Marcus stopped. My people know this forest, Veldrath said. They can reach your wounded companion faster than you can on foot. They will bring both of your squad members here, and you will have a full night to warm them and repair your equipment. And in the morning you will leave by the northern trail, which will take you to a valley where your military search pattern will find you within 48 hours. The offer was made in the flat, precise tone of someone describing facts rather than favors. Marcus had heard that tone before in field officers who had learned that the best way to give a gift was to make it sound like logistics. You don't have to. I am aware, Veldrath said. I am choosing to. Mavi was watching her father. Veldrath did not look at her, but there was something in the set of his shoulders that was different from an hour ago. Something that had released. Some long-held calculation that had been running in the background of 400 years and had finally revised its assumptions. The world outside will reach this place eventually, Veldrath said. It was not directed at anyone in particular. I have known this. I have built walls against it and kept records of its edges, and monitored its advances. And I have told my daughter that safety lives inside these walls. I was not wrong. But I was not entirely right either. He turned to Marcus. The world outside has teeth, Veldrath said. But it also has this. Whatever this is. He gestured. A small, precise gesture that in his species indicated the thing being pointed at was real but difficult to name. Whatever a human is in a dark forest, alone and injured, that walks into an unknown place and asks for help and then, when given shelter, responds by solving problems. That's not specific to humans, Marcus said. No, Veldrath said. But you are the first of your kind I have met, and you are an example of it. That is sufficient to revise the model. He left to organize the rescue. Mavi stood in the corridor outside the chamber, watching Marcus recheck his equipment. She was quiet for a while. He has not let anyone in, she said, in 40 years. Not a new resident. Not a traveler, the last time it went badly. A pause. I do not know all of it. He does not tell me the whole story. But I know that it ended with him spending 3 months rebuilding a wing that had been destroyed, and 200 years of being more careful. And he let me in anyway, Marcus said. You were cold and injured, and had no ulterior motive he could identify. She paused. Also, I think he recognized something in how you spoke about your squad. Marcus looked at her. He has been afraid, Mavi said, that this place is a world I can have instead of the world. He built it that way. He is very good at building things the way he intends them, and it frightens him when they become something other than intended. She was quiet for a moment. You told him that things built for personal reasons often end up being for everyone. I think he needed to hear that. Chen arrived at 1800 hours, supported between 2 of Veldrath's guides. Tall, blue-gray creatures with long upper limbs that functioned as both arms and structural support. and expressions that communicated professional competence across any species barrier. Chen's suit had a breach in the right thigh sealing layer, and she had been keeping herself warm with the chemical pack from her emergency kit and an expression of pure concentrated stubbornness. Reyes arrived 40 minutes later, moving under his own power, carrying his rifle with the precise, controlled readiness of someone who had been alone in hostile terrain for 18 hours and had not allowed himself to process this yet. They both stopped walking when they saw the facility. "Webb," Chen said. "Yeah, what is this place?" "Long story. Warm food, charging ports, one night we leave at first light. Don't touch anything and be polite." Reyes looked at the entrance, at the light coming from inside, at the shapes moving in the interior. "Are those civilians?" Marcus said. "Displaced civilians. They're having a party, or something equivalent to a party. We're guests." Both of them looked at him. "I know," Marcus said. "I'll explain later. Come inside. Chen, let's get that breach sealed." Veldrath met them at the entrance and did not flinch, which Marcus suspected cost him something. He greeted them with the formal posture of a host receiving expected arrivals, which was technically not what this was, and showed them to chambers adjacent to Marcus's, and said nothing about the logistics of 3 armed humans now occupying a sanctuary built on the premise that humans did not exist. That night, from the Great Hall, the sound of community rose through the corridors again. Marcus lay in the chamber that had been given to him and listened to it, and thought about what Veldrath had said. That these were the remainders, the ones left behind, when an expanding force passed through a region and left no room for what had been there before. He thought about the Kethi scholars with their synchronized thought expressions. The family sharing food from a central pot. The lone gray figure, simply existing in a space where existing was permitted. He thought about Mavi standing at the railing that morning, looking at the sunrise with the expression of someone who has been told they cannot have the world. He thought about Veldrath, 400 years of stone and care and deliberate, stubborn love, and one moment in an administrative chamber where a soldier from the species he had been taught to fear had offered to fix a problem, and he had said yes. The war was not going to be resolved in this forest. The Vethran expansion was not going to reverse itself because 3 soldiers had been given a warm room for the night. The displaced species in the Great Hall were still displaced, still fragmented, still living in the facility of a man who had spent centuries learning that grief could be converted, with enough labor, into architecture. But that was not the full accounting. The full accounting included a drone that had been redirected, 2 soldiers who had been retrieved from a cold forest, a father who had revised his model of the world outside, a daughter who had stood at a railing and watched the sunrise, and felt, for the first time in 118 years, that the walls around her were a shelter rather than a cage. The full accounting included the moment when Veldrath's guides had come back with Chen between them, and Marcus had seen on their faces, across all the biological distance between their species and his, the expression of beings who had done a kind thing and knew it. That was not nothing. In Marcus's experience, that was rarely nothing. He slept well. They left at first light, as promised. Veldrath walked with them to the edge of the facility's outer wall, to the place where the stone ended and the forest began. He gave them supplies. Food that was not designed for human digestion but had been adapted with 3 hours of work in the facility's kitchen by someone who had clearly done xenobiological nutritional conversion before. He gave them a route, marked on a physical medium rather than anything electronic, which Marcus understood was not just practicality but a kind of trust. A drawing of the mountains and the valley and the path between, made by someone who knew this landscape, the way you only knew a thing you had spent centuries inside. Chen and Reyes were 50 meters into the tree line when Marcus stopped. Veldrath stood at the facility's edge. In the early morning light, coat the color of dried blood, eyes amber red, very still, in the way of something that had decided to let someone go, and was holding itself steady for the parting. "Thank you," Marcus said. Veldrath was quiet for a moment. "You solved a problem," he said. "We are even. That's not what I'm thanking you for." Another pause. "No," Veldrath said. "I know." From an upper window barely visible, the gold of Mavi's eyes caught the light for a moment. Marcus lifted his hand, a human gesture. She probably didn't know it, but she raised a hand back. It was the wrong number of fingers and the joint configuration was different, and it was entirely clear. He turned and walked into the forest. The valley was 2 days' walk. On the 3rd day, a colonial search craft found their signal and extracted them. In his debrief, Marcus reported a survival situation, a navigational recovery, 2 days of evasion, and ultimately successful extraction. He did not report the facility. He did not report the signal beacon, which he had subsequently identified as a leaking harmonic from a deep subsurface heating element that Veldrath would want to know about, and which he included in a sealed note that he attached to the bottom of the route drawing and left with the quartermaster to be destroyed, or not, as circumstances required. The quartermaster was a thorough man and destroyed it. The note said, in full, south wall subterranean level bearing 213. The harmonic is at 47 Hz. Shielding is possible with common materials. Web. And then underneath that, because Marcus had learned in years of military service that the most important communications were always the ones that couldn't fit in a formal report. Thank you for the room. I won't forget the work it took to build it. He didn't forget. 12 years later, when the war ended, not in triumph, not in annihilation, but in the grinding, slow exhaustion of two species who had run the numbers and found that neither could afford the arithmetic of continuing, Marcus Webb, now a captain, filed a single request with the newly formed Colonial Interspecies Liaison Office. He requested that a particular set of coordinates in a particular mountain range on a particular planet be classified as a protected cultural heritage site under the provisional post-war framework. He listed the site as Facility of Unknown Historical Origin, Occupied, Civilian, Active Cultural Preservation Function. The request was processed, the coordinates were flagged, the facility was never touched. 4 centuries of stone and care and one old creature's specific, stubborn love for all the things the galaxy was trying to erase. And a human soldier who had walked in out of a cold forest and remembered it, and did the one small thing he could, which was to put a wall of bureaucracy between it and the world outside. That was what an after was made of. That was how you built something that lasted.